There are 15 dark psychology tricks that could be used to control you without you even realizing it. In fact, these subtle tactics could shape your decisions, your emotions, and even your behavior, and you'd likely never even notice. The Lucifer Effect. It's a subtle and yet a powerful manipulation tactic that works by gradually breaking down someone's moral boundaries. It starts off small and then escalates. A manipulator starts by asking for minor things that bend your values, like telling small lies for them. Over time, these tiny moral slips begin to add up, and suddenly your white lies are larger and they represent more unethical behavior. Before you know it, you've crossed lines that you never thought you would. You are now trapped, and turning back would mean admitting how far you've gone. And the scariest part, you didn't even realize that you were being manipulated. The Dark Triad refers to 3 personality traits that are often used in manipulation: Machiavellianism, Narcissism, and Psychopathy. These traits can be used individually or together to control, deceive, and exploit others. Here's how a manipulator would use each of these traits. Machiavellianism is all about strategic deception. They lie, cheat, and manipulate, but always in a calculated way to achieve their goals. Narcissism involves a sense of entitlement and superiority. The manipulator uses charm and charisma to gain admiration and loyalty. Once they've won your trust, they manipulate that loyalty for their own benefit. Psychopathy is defined by a lack of empathy and guilt. They are cold, calculating, and completely unconcerned with the feelings of those they hurt. A skilled manipulator might use all 3 traits to influence you, first gaining your trust through charm, then manipulating you with deception and strategic lies, all while remaining emotionally detached from any harm they cause. Inoculation theory works like a psychological vaccine. Just as your body can be protected from disease by being exposed to a small, harmless version of a virus, a manipulator can inoculate you against opposing viewpoints by exposing you to weak versions of them. Here's how a manipulator would use it. They'll bring up a weak or easily dismissible version of an argument that goes against what they want you to believe. For example, if they want to convince you of their opinion, they might casually mention, "Some people say this won't work," but they don't understand the full picture. By framing the opposing argument as flawed or uninformed, they've preemptively weakened it in your mind. Later, when you hear the stronger version of that argument from someone else, you're more likely to dismiss it because you've already been exposed to a weak version of it. The manipulator has prepared you to resist persuasion. Subliminal priming is a technique where someone influences your thoughts or behavior without you even realizing it by exposing you to subtle cues. These cues can be words, images, or even sounds that your brain picks up on unconsciously. To make this work, specific words or imagery that steers your thinking in the direction desired by a manipulator would be introduced. For example, if they want you to feel relaxed and open to their suggestion, they might play soft music, use calming colors, or say words like trust and easy throughout the conversation. Your brain absorbs these cues without you noticing, and as a result, you feel more comfortable and willing to agree with their ideas. It's a subtle but powerful way to guide your emotions and decisions without overtly telling you what to think. The foot in the door technique is a psychological strategy where someone gets you to agree to a small request first, making you more likely to agree to a larger one later. To take advantage of this, a manipulator might start by asking you for something small and easy, like a tiny favor or a simple task. Because it's so minor, you feel comfortable saying yes. Once you've agreed, they follow up with a bigger request, which you're now more likely to accept because you've already committed to helping them. A manipulator knows that once you've said yes to something small, it becomes harder for you to refuse their next larger request. It's all about creating a sense of consistency, where you feel like you need to keep agreeing to avoid feeling guilty or unhelpful. By the way, if you're finding this video helpful so far, give it a thumbs up. It helps more people discover this content, and we're all about spreading knowledge here on PsycKeys. And if you want to dive deeper into the human mind and learn practical tips for personal growth, Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got a lot more to explore together. Now, let's move on to more of these lesser-known but highly effective manipulation tactics, like ambiguity exploitation. Ambiguity exploitation is a tactic where a manipulator deliberately leaves things unclear or vague, creating confusion that they can use to control the outcome. In action, it looks like this. A manipulator would present information or give instructions that are intentionally incomplete or open to interpretation. For example, in a work setting, a manipulator might give you vague directions for a project. When you ask for clarification, they remain unclear. Later, if things go wrong, they blame you for not understanding. The key here is that by keeping things ambiguous, they hold all the power. You become reliant on them for guidance, while they have the flexibility to manipulate the situation to suit their needs. The door-in-the-face technique is a clever manipulation tactic where someone starts by making a large, unreasonable request that you'll likely refuse, only to follow up with a smaller, more reasonable request. A person might implement this first by asking you for something big, something they know you'll say no to, like asking for a large sum of money or a huge favor. Once you refuse, they come back with a much smaller request. This second, smaller request seems so reasonable in comparison that you're more likely to agree. The trick works because after rejecting the big request, you feel a bit guilty and more inclined to say yes to the smaller one, even though you wouldn't have agreed to it if it had been asked up front. The contrast principle is a psychological tactic where the perception of an option is influenced by what it's compared to. By showing you something extreme first, a manipulator can make their actual request seem much more reasonable. Here's how a manipulator would use it. They start by showing you an extreme option, like a high price or an unreasonable demand, knowing you'll likely reject it. Then, they present the option they really want you to choose. In comparison to the extreme one, their real request seems moderate, even appealing. For example, they might show you an overpriced product first, then follow up with the one they actually want you to buy, which now feels like a bargain. The key to the contrast principle is making the second option look favorable by framing it against something far worse. Learned helplessness is a psychological state where someone feels powerless to change their situation, even when they actually can. It happens when someone is repeatedly exposed to negative or stressful situations, and they start believing that no matter what they do, nothing will improve. A manipulator uses learned helplessness by repeatedly putting you in situations where you fail or where your efforts don't matter. Over time, you start to believe that no action you take will make a difference. For example, in a toxic relationship, a manipulator might constantly criticize you or make you feel like nothing you do is ever good enough. Eventually, you stop trying to stand up for yourself or change the situation because you believe there's no point in trying. By making you feel helpless, the manipulator gains more control because you become dependent on them for direction, even though you could change things if you believed you had the power. Information overload occurs when someone is bombarded with so much information that they become overwhelmed and unable to process it all. This confusion makes it easier for a manipulator to influence decisions. Someone would use this by flooding you with excessive details, facts, or jargon, making it hard for you to focus on what's important. In this overwhelmed state, you're more likely to accept their suggestions or guidance because it's easier than sorting through the overload. By controlling the flow of information, they steer your decision-making without you realizing it. The scarcity tactic is a manipulation technique that plays on the fear of missing out. It makes something seem rare or limited, triggering urgency and pushing you to act quickly. Here's how a manipulator would use it. They create a sense of urgency by telling you that a resource, like time, a product, or an opportunity, is scarce. For example, there are only 2 spots left, or this deal expires tonight. This scarcity makes you feel pressure to act immediately, bypassing your usual decision-making process. You become more likely to comply because you fear missing out on the opportunity. False memory. Planting is a manipulation technique where someone subtly suggests details about an event that didn't happen, causing you to create a false memory of it. A manipulator can use this by repeatedly suggesting that something occurred, even if it didn't. For example, they might say, "Remember when you agreed to this plan?" Over time, you start believing you actually did. By constantly reinforcing these false details, they convince you to trust a memory that isn't real, using it against you in future arguments or decisions. Emotional contagion is the process where one person's emotions spread to others, causing them to unconsciously mimic the emotional state of the manipulator. A manipulator would use this by projecting strong emotions, whether it's anger, excitement, or anxiety. If they want to control the mood of a group, they would act highly emotional, and soon, everyone around them would be mirroring that feeling. For instance, if they want you to feel anxious or pressured, they'll show signs of stress or urgency. Without realizing it, you start feeling the same emotions, and they gain control over how you react in that situation. The Golem Effect occurs when low expectations are placed on someone, causing them to perform poorly because they internalize those expectations. A manipulator uses the Golem Effect by consistently implying that someone is incapable or unlikely to succeed. For example, they might give subtle negative feedback or assign insignificant tasks. Over time, the person starts believing they aren't capable of more, and their performance suffers. The manipulator's low expectations become a self-fulfilling prophecy, making the person dependent on the manipulator for validation or direction. Paradoxical intention is a technique where someone encourages you to do the opposite of what you want to achieve, creating internal conflict and stress. A manipulator can use this by challenging you to do the very thing you're trying to avoid. For example, if you're trying to stay calm, they might say, "I bet you can't stay relaxed in this situation." This creates pressure, making it harder for you to maintain control. As you focus more on avoiding the undesired behavior, you're more likely to fall into it, giving the manipulator exactly what they want. So, there you have it. 15 of the darkest tricks manipulators use to control and influence without you even knowing it. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.